Quick plug, everybody. This episode is brought to you by Sorin exercise equipment. These savages build the best gyms in the business. They look the toughest. They are the toughest. Most weight-bearing capacity, incredibly customizable, colors, logos, all that jazz. But the racks and the gyms that they do create, the magic is in their adaptability. You can do absolutely every single exercise, some way, shape, or form on their equipment. It saves you space when you can do everything at one spot, and it looks cool as fuck. So shout out the boys, Sorinex.com, Sorinex, Sorinex, and at Sorinex on socials. Back to the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Edges podcast. I'm sitting here in the Sorinex headquarters compound with the legend himself, Bert Sorin. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, dude, I appreciate it. Talk about chasing edges. Like, I love watching you always just not even push against the sides of the box. You just kind of like cut holes in them and just bend the box out every once in a while. You're super fun to watch your journey, man.
Yeah, that's a whole weird concept in and of itself, because like you have your own self-talk with those things, and like when you think you're doing something normal and you're not. It's kind of like the circle I keep is like either Dr. Serrano's pushing me mentally, or I'm just down a rabbit hole where I just got to try it, and like the sauna stuff, all that stuff. It's just a level of curiosity that my circle keeps, and you're a massive part of that circle.
Thank you.
Which has been really cool, and we'll start. We start everyone pretty similar. Like, what are you curious and learning about right now? Where are you chasing edges in your life?
Oh man, I think that's first of all, curiosity is one of the traits that I probably hold most dear with people. You talk to people, and if they're not asking those questions, they're not curious. I hate to say I kind of lose interest pretty quickly, because it's like if you're not chasing something and everything's just groovy in your life, or you're just like, I'm not really interested on what's the other side. Like when we were hunting, my dad and I, we always talk about like, what's on the other side of that field? What's on the other side of this woodlot? Like, you just kind of got to know sometimes, and it always makes you go further and further trying to explore. And after a while, you like, there's a couple properties, like 1,000 acres, I know like the back of my hand. It's just because I kind of wondered what was over there. But that's the journey of it. You keep learning stuff. I mean, for so long in my life, it was always human performance, because my job per se, when I was trying to be a hammer thrower, like, it's such a technical event, and it's almost a martial art in a way. It's a closed skill. You're trying to replicate it. You're trying to have perfected energy and motion and efficiency. And you go so far down the rabbit hole with that, right? But it's also such a rare sport. You don't have this big infrastructure, so you have to become a student of the event if you're going to be good. There's no like, I went to Alabama and we had this boss coach that just made us do this stuff. It's like, if you want to be good at hammer thrower, you better really want to be a good hammer thrower.
You got to get obsessed.
You got to super get obsessed with it. So my early sporting career was always like, the best guys were the ones that just went deepest in the rabbit hole. Like, that's what you do. Otherwise, you could be pretty good, but you're not going to the trials. You're not making the teams. You're not doing all those things. So that was, for a long period of my life, was the Olympic hammer throw. After that, I retired from hammer throwing. Then a year later, I was like, well, the Scottish Highland Games thing, I'm not done spinning around and yelling and roaring and just being that person. So I picked up the Scottish Highland Games, went quickly from this is kind of fun to down the rabbit hole again, like to the point where you can't see light, and that was super fun. So that was a great portion of my life, was that physiological side. And then, you run out of maybe white, fast muscle fibers after a while, and you start getting banged up to the point you're like, okay, the injuries take longer to heal from, and then you transition. And then so right now, what's really super interesting for me, other than the business side and understanding how to grow a brand and things like that, because that's what's sustaining me this section of my life, my stuff for me is the outdoors and the hunting world. And yes, because you can't do it perfectly. The hammer throw was always the same way. You could try to perfect the throw, but there's always a better way to do it. You could always be faster, stronger. There's always, we talk about the world record. Everyone says, wow, the world record's this. It's like, the world record is some guy's PR.
Yeah.
And it could always be done better, And so that was like a chasing for perfection. And then you realize one day there is no perfection.
It's an infinite number.
It's like
chasing money concept. Yeah.
Correct. And so that's what I like. But the nature adds another whole facet to that, because, you know, the animal, say in a big game hunting scenario, he gets a vote. I mean, you could be as dialed in and as badass and as perfect and all this other stuff you want, and maybe that animal either picks up on it and senses what's going on, or he just decides to zig when you thought he was going to zag, and he doesn't even know he's in the game. But there's always these changes happening, and these environmental changes, and it's going to be cold and it's going to get snowy, and then there's going to be a thermal shift, and there's always these variables. No hunt is the same. I like that because you can never win. You can never win. So that's kind of where my mind is now, just because there's a part of me too that likes to get out, and it makes me super present. Because when you're in that, I can't be on my phone. I can't be mind else. If you're going to really be good at that, you have to be present. And so in a way, it's a little bit of a vacation from reality.
Yeah, no doubt. And like nature is a variant of meditation and all these things. But
yes.
Like you hear, and you're like your relationship with curiosity is like that there's no moderation. Like
No.
I think a lot of stuff in life, like moderation gets you in trouble, or it gives you regret. Like
Interesting.
I've had this bit with Nate Ebner on the podcast, and then it's gone even down more rabbit holes in that kind of concept where if you do something in moderation, there's so much room for like how much did I really do in that. So now like you don't control the outcome, and like the outcome, like win or lose, isn't the concept where I'm talking about. It's the concept of, I guess, regret and peace you have in yourself. Because if you really commit and go all in and go down the rabbit holes and do the time, energy, effort, now like the effort's always in your control. And if you can truly make it the control instead of a variable, you don't have to look back on your life and say, was I trying there? Why didn't that work out? Like win or lose, like if I gave my all and lost, that's fine. I can go to sleep at night. But if I gave my all or if I didn't give my all, and I was like, did I try? Did I train right? Did I do all these things? And I missed a shot hunting or whatever it ends up being. Like I can't live with that. And I look back on my life through this lens now, and I see regret or places where I either got complacent, which is a massive trap, and didn't give enough effort because I did something I thought I earned and like never arriving. So like that's where like I love the concept, because like you say, like you're just telling your story just now, but that's all I hear. That's the lens I see through now, and I think it's really cool.
Well, thank you. It's kind of a tale of two stories. So like when I was in college, you know, I was really crappy, walk on, blah, 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 you know, unrecruited, ended up being pretty good. But I remember early in my college career thinking, one day I hope to make the NCAA championships. And I hope, and I'm promising to myself, this is like at 19 years old, 18, I was like, my last throw of my college career, I will never, ever wonder if I had more in me. Like whatever that is, whatever position I'm in, first, second, fifth, 50th, whatever it is, I'm putting all my chips in right now for that last throw of my career. It's go or broke, right? And I ended up, my last competition in my career, I actually had a lifetime best on my safety throw of the day. And then, but my last throw, I remember walking in the ring and I'd like hair on my back of my neck stand. I was like, this is what you've thought about for 5 years. It was like, leave nothing in the table. Now, as we all know, like with an event that needs some dexterity, probably a super high arousal state isn't exactly
ideal.
What But I remember, you know, it was still a decent throw, but I remember walking out of the cage and going, wow, should I have strategically done something different to throw further? And I was like, no. I held on to what I believed that I was going to do, that I promised myself that I was going to do. And I knew it was going to be 1,000% effort, and I'm okay. Like I walked out, I knew it wasn't as far. I didn't even watch it land. I was like, and I'm done. And so that was one thing that I look back, I'm like, maybe that was really stupid. I should have like done, but for me and my soul, that was right. Conversely, you know, my hunting seasons lately, you know, you're training and you're doing well, and you start putting these metrics in place. You're like, okay, I'm hitting, you know, 99% of my shots at certain distances. And I'm doing these things. I'm training well, and I'm doing this. And then you go like on a hunt that you've looked forward to all year. Like for this year, it was the high desert in Arizona, an archery hunt for mule deer. And I missed at 72 yards. This is a far bow shot. Deer dipped. He heard the bow go off, like all the things, right? But I walked off that mountain for the third year now without a mule deer. And I'm like, you're just like, okay, I thought I was pretty good at this. I really I trained as hard as anyone I know in this area. And then you start comparing yourself. I'm like, Cameron Haynes would have made that shot.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan would have made that shot. John Dudley would have made that shot. And I was like, okay, you could be in this sphere. It doesn't guarantee shit.
Yeah.
And are they training harder than I am? Are they just better? Or other dudes just better? Other guys at camp killed, Josh Smith killed, this and that. And it's like, and then you're just like, wow, as good as I thought I was and as prepared as I thought I wasn't. I left something on the table. I didn't. And then you start replaying the last couple months. You're like, oh, that one time I could have been training then. Like that other time, like, oh, I thought I was drilling it and I was good and I wasn't. Now, you can't have perfection, but that's what has always worked on me the best is when I hate to say comparing.
Yeah.
And then I go, well, you did the best you could. And people say that. And they go, yeah, but I know guys that would have put that arrow where they wanted it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that means I still have room to go. And then that drives me crazy.
But like a lot of people say like the comparison is the thief of joy and those kind of concepts. But like me and on my journey, like every locker room I walked into, I found the professionals.
Yes.
And I compared myself to them.
Of course.
And yeah, it's the same as setting a goal. Like you're setting a goal to show the difference between what you want and where you're at, and you can see that in other humans. So like the comparison thing kind of like it falls on deaf ears with me sometimes, but like that like and also in the same concept of going all in and still failing. Like you still went all in and failed, but it doesn't like in your perfection's unattainable in most things in life and those kind of things. But like that's some people fold like that. Now this is like a failure success part. Like some people fold. They wouldn't show up for another year, let alone 2 more years, and you're probably going to show up for a 4th year. It sounds like, but that's like it's a segment point on whether you're going to get incredibly curious and start solving problems or expanding your capacity,
right,
or you're going to fold. And like I just I have this bit now where like I've gotten into jiu-jitsu and boxing a little bit, and then obviously I'm into the breath and meditation world where like
when do you sleep, by the way?
Yeah, I don't sleep a lot as much as I used to because of the 4 a.m. stuff. Right. But the concept is like, because like you prepared for a pretty big range of things that happen. Maybe you're dialed from 65 in or whatever it is, but like now you know, like I need to have a little more capability here. I need to know how to like twist when I shoot or brace when I shoot. Or like you found like I think the all in and failing is also a massive teacher because like
sure,
yeah, the best.
Or I should have been in better shape where I could have closed distance faster, gotten there 30 minutes before, and maybe shot at 50 yards, and that'd have been a different scenario. So like all of that plays into, you're like, I should have done this better. I should have done this better. And but that's the stuff that drives you crazy. I was talking to Pat the other night when we went hunting, and I talked about my concept of my wife always calls, she was like, you just have to run the experiment, don't you?
Yeah.
And the experiment for me is whether it was training, training was, there was a hypothesis or there was a foregone conclusion that I was going for. There was a hypothesis. I think if I do this, and this, i.e. programming, that this will give me the desired outcome. I could do all the planning, all the preparation, all the hypothesizing, all that stuff. But what do you have to do eventually? You have to run the experiment.
Yeah.
You have to train for the next 4 weeks and follow your data and your hypothesis, gather data so you could get to a conclusion to go, yes, I was right, or no, I was wrong, and how do I change that? And it's funny, like, she'll look at me sometimes. I'll be like looking outside. She's like, you just got to run the experiment, don't you? And I was like, yeah, that moon's rising. It's within 45 degrees of at daybreak, and I'll have all these data points. And I'm like, the Bucks are going to be moving this afternoon. She's like, you just have to go, don't you? I was like, I just got to know if I was right. Just got to go. I just got to know if in where I think it's going to be based on the wind position and on the food sources and on the pressure. And I put all these little things into the little computer in my head. And I'm just like, I can't think of anything else until I go run the experiment. I have to know. But that's the curiosity, right?
Yeah, I think that's dialed. I like that a lot because I like the moderation is for cowards concept. Like if you're gonna do anything, if doing anything is worth overdoing. The concept. Do you see a detriment to that? Like yeah.
It's hard having a family, or a business or friends.
I don't understand the kids and the family and some of the business stuff. So that's a curiosity thing for me.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, if you have a small tribe of like-minded people, it's like an intoxicating thing, as you well know.
Yeah.
But that's where the balance in life gets hard, because to be truly great at anything, you have to be really unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
And then so like now we're asking ourselves, or our heart is telling us, you want to be this great super deep water, thin air person, but you also have to be, Dr. Dad and CEO guy and all these other things. And, oh, by the way, you also want to be deep water in those too,
Yeah.
and then you look and you're just like, oh, so right. We don't sleep. Got it. So I'll sleep when I'm 70. Perfect. It's super difficult.
Yeah. Have you found any tactics help as of late?
I try to batch things. I try to batch stuff as much as I can. I'll try to be home for a couple weeks and like really pour into the family, and I'll try to like pour into business, like try to get super, like a flow state type deal.
Yeah.
Just like I'm going to flow state this section of my life. Because I find if I try to balance them and like put all these equal lateral amounts of effort towards it, you kind of live in the gray area a lot.
Yeah, or like surface level to some extent.
Surface level, because you can't get too deep, right? And so that's, again, kind of an interesting hunting thing was like a few years ago, I went out to the same kind of thing. I had to run the experiment. Hurricane was coming in. I just had this feeling the deer are going to eat before the hurricane. I'm the only idiot going out in the hurricane.
Into the storm.
But I'm like, they're going to have to eat out of this freshly cut bean field. And it was like a zoo. There was crap everywhere. It was wild, and I was like, yes, the experiment worked, right? And I'm sitting there first day, watch all these deer 400 yards across the field. I'm like, Big Buck has to be with him. I'm going to come back tomorrow after the storm passes. I'm going to kill him when he comes out. So I'm there, I'm watching. I thought I had this place on lock. I'm making these big movements because I'm like, he's 400 yards out. I had my dope set. I'm got it. I'm sitting there jacking around. I'm working. I'm texting back and forth. I'm kind of hunting. I'm doing this other stuff. And I look like this, and I saw something in the corner of my eye, and I grabbed my binoculars, did like that. And he's standing there looking at me like at 50 yards. So now I've moved the first time. I've moved the second time. You don't get a third time.
Yeah.
So I go for the gun, and boom, he's gone. And I just remember, I was like, what just happened? I was like, and I built like a whole business model off of it, or business, and I said, I had sloppy movements. First of all, I had gray areas. Was I hunting or was I working? I needed to pick one because by having gray areas of kind of doing both, I screwed up both. I didn't really get any real work done in the stand that I was like, oh, I'll get some emails blasted out. I kind of was halfway paying attention, and then the whole purpose of why I went out there, I totally boned because I wasn't like locked. So my gray areas screwed me. My gray areas led to sloppy movements. I moved around, and all this stuff happened, and I had all these like points that I learned from that one day. I was like, it was one stupid deer, but it taught me so much about even what I was doing in life in general. The gray movements, all that stuff just left to footholds that my competition had against me because I wasn't staying focused. And so it was, sometimes I try to derive these lessons from just some of my passions because they hurt more and I remember them.
Yeah. You're an incredibly intentional human. You hear it when you speak, and then like obviously like even like the standard you set for like a event like Winter Strong, which is an event they hold, which is outdoor meeting of the minds, exchange of skill and expertise and breaking of bread
that you're going to be teaching at.
Yeah, that
this
we're
year.
going to be coaching at this year.
Yeah,
So giddy up. But like the intention of what's a good way to say it? The expectation for the weekend when you speak to set it, the active behavior around firearms, like there's no like gray area. Like you've effectively taken those out. And like I've been around a lot of other sporting events or educational events where that's not set. And you have people in the gray area getting up, causing distractions, or people not all in, or they don't show up half the time. Like that's not. So you see that show up. And then like as far as like the intention with those things too, I don't want to get onto the shared experience yet, but the purpose you carry around with you, it's kind of unmissable for me. Just I kind of like look through this lens right now too. But like even we went through Bert's armory the other day, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world, I'm sure, in some capacity. But it's littered with purpose. Like you have your first rifle, you have these stories behind all these weapons. And like tales and family and heirlooms, and it's all kind of built into this purpose why the art of hunting is special to you,
right? Because they're just reminders. They're I mean, like even a deer or something on the wall, people are like, oh, it's a nice trophy. I'm like, it's not a trophy, it's just a catalyst to a memory.
Yeah, it's
just something I get to then live back that, and I could tell you probably what date it was, what the temperature was, what the wind position was. Like I just get to relive highlights of my life. And a lot of this stuff is just reminders of people, reminders of opportunities I've had, reminders of failures I've had. And so I just try to surround myself with reminders of highlights and lowlights, because I want to live, like you said, very intentionally. So it reminds me, like, keep your head in the game, man. You don't have time.
Yeah, it's
later than you think.
Yeah.
You know,
I've come across that now with like some of the people in my circle that, like, the cool thing about the podcasting thing is I get to ask questions and you get to know somebody in a different way. And I think like kind of like people don't ask questions anymore as much, or they accept some things, whatever. But I see,
by the way, you're a wonderful question. Like, you're super fun to talk to because you ask super, really, really good questions. And that's something that is very, very refreshing. And I appreciate that. That tells me you're not only IQ, but EQ as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's always fun to watch you because you're always searching. You're always on your journey. And thank you for taking us with your journey, because as you're learning things, you're always bringing it back to the tribe. Like, hey, I figured this stuff out. And you're like, right on. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's like I just kind of have this bit about like help and support are not yours to keep. Like I heard it once and I'm now like, so your heirlooms like that you keep around and reminders of presence and failures, I kind of like use quotes and things like those are like my logic landmarks in my life. So like once I post quotes and things like that, but they mean something to me. I don't care if people think they're stupid and those kind of things, but like that, like every night, like whether I'm self-inflicted or I'm like doing self-reflection and things like that, why am I down? But really I get back to like the flow of information and the feeling of tribe and community. Like if I'm truly helping and supporting other people, like I'm going to get help and support when I'm not in a great place and things like that. But that's where like, that's my purpose relic that keeps me moving forward. And then I have a buddy I live with now, Corey Gregory. He does the same thing. Like he keeps the lunch pail from when he was working in a coal mine, like the gym of his floors from the coal mine to remind him. And then he puts purpose to his social media posts, which I thought this was a really cool concept. His purpose in posting isn't like, it's not for the world or to pump his supplements or his workouts, and it's like it's a story for his kids to watch someday. Like he purposely intentionally posts with the extent of like telling a story.
That's great.
And I think it's a cool, like, because he does like these daily fire motivations where he pulls from his own life and other things he's reading. But like I think it's a photograph book for
and you know, Derek Woodsky mentioned that to me a long time ago, because at the time he wasn't doing any kind of like a business thing. There's no business reason that he would be on social media. And I was like, so what'd you get into Instagram for? He's like, oh, I just thought it would be great as a diary and a picture thing that would just be held. He's like, so if my phone goes down, I have all my favorite pictures and what I thought about at the moment. I'm like, oh, so this is really just for you. He's like, yeah. He goes, and if you think it's interesting, cool.
Yeah.
You know,
you can reframe things like that. And like, again, I just like the thought. So like I'm intentionally trying to put like things of my past around me now that remind me of success and failure and things. So like, and I saw like that. That's all I was thinking yesterday in your armory, as I heard these stories and heard you tie them to different highlights, lowlights, or like struggle to get X animal, or
just
how your dad raised you,
or something to think to solve a problem. Like that's, that's.
It's just like I think like having a purpose is like, what are you willing to struggle for, and like you're willing to struggle for this next hunt or your family or however you remind yourself of it, or not going back to where you were.
Competition or what lift or all that. That's what it's all about. And I think, like you said, in intentionality or intention, that's one of the main facets that we do here at work. Like, you know, my dad always told me, he's like, you could do whatever you want to do, just have a reason why you did it. He's like, you won't get in trouble if there's a reason. You know, if you just did it because you just didn't think and act like an idiot, like, we're going to have an issue. But even if you're wrong and you're like, well, I did this because, like, with a logical explanation behind it, it's like, okay, we'll correct that. But there had to be intention behind it. And that just teaches you to be intentional early on. So like when we design equipment, it's like, don't design it because that's what the industry says, or your competition. Like, what's the real reason you need to or don't need to do this? And so I think when there's an intention behind that, like even in some of the design of or some even the decoration of it, like it has to be very intentional and well thought out, or just don't do it. Like, stay away from it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And because I clump things into like mindful and mindless.
Perfect.
So like me watching Netflix and things like that, that's mindless, and I have boundaries on it. But like like things like copying the market or like putting this post out because other people put this post out, or whatever ends up being, like what's truly mindful and intentional.
Yes.
And like, so now I kind of have hard lines in the sand on what I like reading mindful, TV mindless, unless I'm watching a documentary or YouTube videos and those kind of things.
Yeah, no, it's your richness of your mind and your experience in your life is going to be so much greater than, I hate to say, the average person, because you live in that mindful area. A friend of mine, Brent Cogdell, he does something that it's hard for me to even talk about without tearing up. He has an app in his phone, or it's basically like notes. And so every day, almost everything he does, he journals and basically like writes, I'm going to say a story per se, but he journals to not only himself, but to his wife and his kids every day, like almost anything he does. He's like, hey, got up, had 32 ounces of water this morning, got to see Bert earlier on. We talked about this and that. So, man, it was great seeing he and his dad. Love those guys, praying for him. And then he showed it to me one day, and I'm like, for years, he's been doing all of it. And I'm like, why do you do that? He goes, because if I was to die today, my family would know exactly what I thought. He goes, they'll never have to wonder. He's like, every time I thought of my kids, every time I thought of my wife, I'd put it down. And you're like, you just won life.
Yeah.
You just won life, man. You've been so intentional, because 2 years ago, his cousin, it's a terrible accident. He was supposed to be running the tractor. It went down. He had to go somewhere else. His cousin went, and his cousin got killed in an accident. And so he told me, he's like, I just realized how fast it could happen. So he's like, I never want a day to go by where my loved ones don't know what I'm thinking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much work. But it's so, like, he wrote the love story of his life to his people. Like, whoa, it just blew my mind. And he still does it. Yeah, he still does it. It's insane.
I fucking love that.
It's unbelievable. Right?
Because like I've gotten heavier into journaling and those kind of things, and it's more for me. But these last couple months, like talking to Corey, talking to you, and hearing something like that is like, and one of my buddies hit me with a bit the other day. Like, he asked me how I say goodbye to my mom every time, and I do it really nonchalant. Right. And he told me a story of his friend that passed away, that the last time he gave his mom knucks. And like, just like being a funny guy, and like I err on the side of being a funny guy with my family, and it's not intentional, it's mindless. And so like doing self-reflection, like now I hug my mom like I mean it. And and it opens up another emotional doorway for me too, because now like it just like even that connection of a hug for a little bit while longer is just like, that's memorable. Like there's certain people in your life you can remember a hug or anything like that. I think that's really cool. But like, so now, like, how many of your interactions are mindful or mindless? Like, that's like, because that's not just for him. Like, he's doing that like in case of worst case scenario. And
what a gift would that be? Like, if you lost someone and then you were able to go, oh my gosh, Dad left us this. For generations. This is it. This is his heart the whole time. It's like, man. And so like, I think of that sometimes, like, if you notice, like when you're at the house, like the kids all hugged everyone, and like that's something that we do because, I don't know, I go do a bunch of weird stuff. Like, I could slide off of a mountain tomorrow, and like sometimes I'll sit there when I put them down, the kids down, I'm just like, man, I'm gonna go fly across the country tomorrow and go do this and this thing. And it's like, stuff happens to people, and you're like, what's the last time maybe I put them down and I don't know it? Like, did I do everything that I needed to do today where they have no questions? And that's heavy. That hits me a lot. And, I'm 45, but who knows I might have one more day. I might have 50 more years. I don't know. But I think at a certain age, I started thinking through those things. And, like, you be very mindful, intentional of how you address people and how you address your loved ones specifically, and realize that, what you've seen, I'm sure that meme is like, the last day that we all played outside as kids on the block, do we realize that was that last day? Because one day it was. Yeah, it was. And we just walked home. We didn't know. We were like, later, deuces, man. And then it's like, that never happened again. And so I think at a certain age, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, or just maybe more introspective, you just realize, you're like, okay, like, all the people that are currently in my life a year from now will not be the same people. Something will change.
Very real.
It's very real. And so in the next year of my life, how I integrate with those people, it's some people it will be the last time. I know a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then so that's like, it's heavy for me to think about. And and loss is hard for me to take. But that drives that intention. And that's like, okay, we'll do a little bit more. Do a little bit more, because you never know. And then you kind of realize later, like, okay, if you do a little bit more all the time, that person might be around 50 years. And man, what an awesome relationship you'll have.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I've kind of re-geared my life towards, is just squeezing every little bit out of whatever time we have here and just try to leave way more than you take.
Yeah, it's a bunch of little mores here and there.
Right.
They compound, or they seal a relationship as
Sure.
opposed to let it walk away. And
Yeah.
this could go a lot of different ways, because like the Stoic philosophy is like memento mori. I got it tattooed on my bicep.
Sure.
Like, you could leave life right now. Like that's an old problem. Like, this is the same quandary we're in. It's like an old problem that has an old solution. It's that constant reminder that, like, live life like it's your last, or like, don't take this day for granted. And you can pound that home. And then now if you flip it, this is going a different direction. Like the Michael Jordans of the world, like these very intentional humans, these very competitive, curious humans. He knew that somebody in the stands, that was the first and only time they were going to see him play. So like, that was his purpose for deriving this performance level.
Wow.
It just helped support his performance. And like that, like, and then like, people get it twisted. Like, a lot of great humans and successful humans, like, your lives are very boring, but like, you do all these little compounding, just incredibly intentional, thoughtful, careful, mindful things. And then now it's a better human, but the relationships and the support system just become untouchable.
Yeah. And to push back to it, and if you do that, your life isn't boring.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the key of it. It's not boring. It's like, oh, I got to do this. Like, hey man, did you make 5 people smile today? Did you give some people some hugs? Did you throw someone a salad? Did you do, like, that's great.
Yeah.
That's so much fun, and if you find that boring, then I don't know what to think.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so the kind of a funny, like, me and Kush talked about it really quick on the second podcast kind of deal. Like, I've always kind of been in that realm, like a compassionate, whatever, give person. And there's a while where my mindset was that was detrimental to my performance.
Of course.
And it
could have been.
Yeah, and it could have been. And like, but I, like, the more I sit with it and the more I've talked to people about it and the more I've just understood it, like, I wouldn't go back, because that's who I am and that's how I handle my business. And Kush, like, he goes, you should never apologize for that. You should never apologize for going out of your way to help people. That's just, again, like, whether it comes full circle or not, doesn't matter. Like, that's how I wanted to feel and make people feel, or whatever it ends up being. But you
got your payment on the front end.
Yeah, and then that's all I needed. And like, it doesn't have to be a regret of mine. That's just like one of my little, like, regret demons that I had to put to sleep.
Sure, and that's understandable. Yeah, I mean, it's everyone, and that's the cool part. Freedom. Everyone has their way that they could sail their ship, right?
Yeah.
And whatever makes them go, and that doesn't always have to be the same thing.
Yeah, but like, I mean, there's working with a bunch of people. This is a massive thing I like about you and how you handle your business is like your emphasis on shared experience. And because you go, like, I'm not gonna say you go out of your way, like, it's probably just how you're wired to some extent, but you understand the value of shared experience versus this, like, lone wolf concept. Could you go, like, a little deeper on that?
I appreciate it. I think a lot of it, honestly, is because I was an only child, and so I didn't have brothers and sisters, and I lived in a cul-de-sac that I could own until I was probably 10 or 12 years old. I couldn't, like, go outside of the cul-de-sac during the, because it was like, up the top of the road. Go maybe 10 or so, I could ride my bike. But I had these, like, 2 kids who were 2 of my best friends, and they were, like, across the street, and both of them had brothers and sisters and all this stuff. So, like, they'd play with me sometimes, but you know how it works when you have 3 kids. Like, one kid is getting the shaft, right? And that was usually me, because I was like this, like the little bit nicer kid, maybe like a little bit slower for social cues, because I didn't have like the older brother or sister, like, so I was like the one that would fall for the dumb shit, and like, and so, and then the older brother or sister would kind of like razz on me too, and I'm like, and I'd just go home, so I had like, a little group, but like, there's a lot of time spent by myself, and you kind of think about, like, man, I wish I had a brother and sister. I wish I had my tribe. I was a living, single mom, You know, she's a teacher. She was into a whole bunch of stuff. So it was like a lot of time to be around by myself, which I think was huge for my development. And some things, ingenuity and learning how to solve problems and just creativity and stuff like that. But a lot of it was like, man, I wish I had like a big family and like a bunch of brothers and sisters and friends, and a team would be super cool. But I didn't do a lot of team sports because I didn't know a lot about it. So I was kind of like afraid to do it because I was like, I don't know how to play this game. And I'm afraid to ask anyone because then everyone else knows how to do it. And they're going to make fun of me that if I don't know how to do it, they know how to do it. So I'm going to go shoot my bow.
Yeah.
I'm going to go fishing because no one could make fun of me. No one could think I'm dumb because I can't throw a spiral really well. Like I could throw the shit out of a bait casting reel.
Yeah.
I could go do what I like to do. And that's how I kind of developed through that. And of course I had friends and stuff later on, but like that kind of like during the formative years, it was like, I want to see people smile. I want to see people happy to see me. I want to be valuable to people. I want to, have a family or have people that I would want to sacrifice for. But you realize kind of early on, like, oh, you could do that if you're valuable to others. Otherwise, you don't get a spot at the table. So it was early on. It's like, well, I like making people happy. I like seeing people smile. So like, how do you do that? And you're like, all right, get kind of good at something and share it with them. Like that was kind of the thought. And then, and then when it was Dad and I, strangely enough, my dad's an only child too. So he dealt the same thing. But so then he and I are running a business. It's he and I. So you have two only children running a business, not know what the hell we're doing, trying to figure it out. We're very creative. We know how to lift all the other stuff. But the other stuff, you just get overrun. You don't know what to do. So there's like, hey, like, let's let other people in on this and like try to like build this tribe of like-minded people so we could like actually go out and take on the fitness world. But we're going to have to like really include everyone on this and like, here's our mission, here's what we do, and we can't do it by ourselves. But hopefully we could show you the value of being a part of this through these things we could do well. And let's have this shared experience. And then as the more it happened, the more the shared experience became the goal, right?
What was like the first step into the shared experience? Can you think of anything?
I mean, Pops has always been a guy that just, he was a teacher. And so like, he would always have like contests. And like, even when I was in college, we were the guys that were always like hosting cookouts on the team and like trying to bring everyone together. Let's go do stuff together. Like, I was always the guy at like my track house was like, all right, guys, I like let everyone borrow a fishing rod. I was like, let's go to the river and go fishing. I was like, I don't want to stay. I'm like, shut up, get in the truck. Like, let's go, And so it's always like, let's go on the adventure. Let's grab our camping stuff and go camp this weekend. Let's go create these times together. And so that was always just exciting for me, but I got a lot of that from my dad. And then, in the business as it started, Summer Strong were some of those first ones. You had 38 people show up and like, what are we going to do? I'm like, I don't know. We're going to lift. We're going to talk about lifting and eat and drink and see where it takes us.
Yeah.
Right. There's like, what's the purpose? What is this thing? And then the business model is like, what's the thing? What's the return on investment? It's like, I don't know. Is it fun?
Yeah.
Do people like it? Does it make them better people by doing it? Then cool. Let's do that. And then Summer Strong, that kept happening. We just kept like, let's do that thing we did last year. Like, okay, cool. And then you go 4, 5, 6 years, and then you realize like, oh man, we have like 200-300 people showed up, and the conversations are getting deeper, and people are starting they're coming there because it's a family reunion. They have something in common. They had the shared experience, and then we were all in the room when so and so talked, and wow, that hit us a certain way, and we all shared that experience. Whether you were there for Alex Oliver's or Neil Kamimura's or Pat and Kaz, or there's so many of them. But you look around, and I would say like a generation of people is like, where were you when the space shuttle blew up? Where were you when the towers got hit? Where were you? And like, I've had people say like, were you there when Neil talked? And you kind of see like a misty eye, and they're like,
no, I was there. I was there for that. So
right?
Like, just like a.
And
yeah,
then, so that shared experience
is
powerful. And the shared experience is, wow, he shared with us. We gave him the opportunity and the fertile ground to share. That's what I was able to bring to the table and leverage my friendship. Said, hey man, I'd love for you to share. And then he Annie up the ante and was like, not only want to share, like, I got something for you, and here it goes. And then it blew everyone's faces off. And, like, I'm super grateful to him, and I'm super grateful to him for giving me the opportunity to give that gift to my people, and it's not for me. It's not like, I mean, he and I could have sat there and he could have told me the story and we'd have cried a whole bunch around a fire and that'd have been it. But like, to give that story to 500 or 600 people that it changed their life, like that, in my opinion, is the whole purpose of this. That's the whole purpose of this whole thing in life. Like, keep pouring into and making people's lives better. And like, that's the metric, man.
Yeah. That's the real value.
It's the real value.
Yeah. It's
money will come and go. All the other crap will come and go. Like, it doesn't matter. None of that shit matters.
Yeah, you're making landmarks kind of in your own sense.
And hopefully, things will happen because of different things that we invest in, and time and effort and stuff like that, that'll change lives or change your trajectory of a life that hopefully I'll know about, but probably never will.
Yeah.
Like, hopefully someone's bloodline will change trajectories off of something that our tribe brings to the table. And that's the exciting part to think about. Like, that part really juices me out.
Yeah, that's it's just special because like just being like, again, is Neil's speech on like YouTube and that kind of thing.
Yes, Neil Kamimura, Summer Strong 12, 13, something like that. It's on YouTube. It
was a really powerful speech, and like with a sense where like whatever 400 or 500 people, like there's usually a lot of chatter there in between speakers and those kind of things. Everybody's kind of like walked away quiet and like and you felt it. And Neil was forging a knife while telling his story and his perspective, and like being incredibly vulnerable with everybody. And that's a whole nother track we can go down real quick. I don't know how much time we have.
Whatever time we need.
Yeah. Like vulnerability, like that's like, again, like the stories you just told, and like, again, the emotions that come from, again, like it's just the alpha status of different people. And like the more I find that like I can be more vulnerable is really like kind of like a deal sealer on like how you handle my vulnerability. Is like kind of how I value you as a friend in some aspect. I don't like, it's not like a give and take return I'm looking for, but like if I can't be vulnerable around you or anything like that, like it's probably not good. Like, you're probably not a good human for me.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Because yes, and let's be honest, if your vulnerability is just like ultimate truth, you're not being true with me if you have your guard up still. And that's okay. Like, not everyone has to be, but if you are being extremely vulnerable, you're opening up everything. And if you trust me enough to handle that, I would be a horrible person if I didn't take that lovingly and protect that and nurture that and reciprocally give back to that, and I get, everyone has their layers of protection and their defenses and stuff like that. And some people will give that vulnerability very quickly, and some people are guarded, and that's cool too. It's, some people, you see them like I hate to say it this way, like a dog that's been beat, and they have that growl every time you come near them. And some people are like, man, that dog's, tough dog. And I'm like, it's not a tough dog, man. It's a scared dog.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay, but I'm not going to beat him into being like a nice dog.
Yeah.
Love up on him. And he might bite you, and love up on him, and he might bite you and love up on him, and then he might growl. And then eventually, if he realizes you're cool with him and you're okay with him, he'll probably start being vulnerable and let you pet him.
Yeah.
And I guess I prefer to do that with people. And I have an affinity for people who can be very dangerous and have that capacity for that. And I kind of love the dichotomy of someone who's, and many times an actual literal killer.
Yeah.
But when you could get in there and let them open up their emotions and who they are, and they feel safe, I think that's some of the best work when it's done.
No, for sure. And you've shared that with the community and the tribe you've built too, with some of the guys that have spoken before. So I think that's massive. Like some of the nuances of vulnerability that intrigue me are like the rehearsed the rehearsed responses to common questions, or the rehearsed response to what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's like when I was transitioning from sport, I was like, I'm staying busy, I'm doing these things, like trying to make money, whatever it is, those kind of things. Like that's not vulnerability. I look for the unrehearsed, like if you got to think and get to this real story, like how do I really feel about that? Like that's kind of like the vulnerability nuance. Like I try and get around deep, like, and that's like deep water conversations. Right. It's where like when we're doing like a group think vulnerability, like where am I smart, where am I stupid, those kind of things. I like those conversations, and you've built that environment.
Oh
which
man,
you've become really cool.
Well, thank you. I mean, you're an awesome, conversationalist in that world too. That's what's so fun. And you get that, like you said, like how's it going? Oh yeah, killing it, crushing it, running hot. Like. Yeah.
What's going on?
I mean, that's about as surface as it gets.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just like, I don't got time for it. You don't have the capacity to take this all in right now. And sometimes that's the answer, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes just like, I'm not ready to dig into that right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to keep this armor on because I still got a lot of fighting to do.
Yeah, no doubt.
And it's not, I hate to use the term vulnerability, like it's like we all need to walk around like wet blankets, but you got to lay down the sword every once in a while.
No doubt. And just a reminder that you still got it.
Yeah. And then there's sometimes that you got to get swinging.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could remember the quote, but basically like there's this bit, it's from Act of Valor, the movie, where basically like the intro scene to the movie is my dad told me when I was young that the worst thing that could ever happen is that people stop viewing me as dangerous. And like, cause like that's a patch of honor. That's a hierarchy in the tribe, just to keep that in your back pocket, to keep that dangerous edge.
Well, what do they say? Like, if I can't remember, you're probably better with.
Yeah, I'm a slut for a good quote.
Yeah. And it was basically like, if someone along the lines of like a nice man without the or a nice person or a nice man without the ability to do violence is just a useless person. They're not being nice. They're just useless. They don't have a choice. That's all.
I got the quote.
Yeah, I know the quote. You know it. You're way smarter than me.
You can't say you're peaceful unless you're capable of great violence. If you're not capable of violence, you're not peaceful. You're actually just harmless. There's a very important distinction there. And like that's where like you got to have that both sides of it. But we'll wrap it up.
I knew you would have it.
Oh yeah. I get anything with violence and peace or breathing, anything. I got the quote. But
sure.
Yeah. No. Bert's lovely wife just walked in. She's tapping the clock. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I told her to come on in, and she's the one that keeps me sane and keeps me. I get to bounce all these crazy ideas off of her, and she checks me. It's like, well, did you think about? And she's a counselor, so it's perfect.
Yeah, so
I have the perfect deep water conversation.
Great question asker. Yeah,
wonderful question asker. She's taught me to be a better question asker versus just verbal dumping, belt-fed verbal dump on people.
Yeah,
and I get excited like a little kid.
She's kind of like the experiment manager. Yeah, just kidding. But no, that's a wrap. Where can everybody find you?
You'd Bert Sorin on Instagram, Facebook, sorinx.com, sorinx on IG. I think we have like Sorinx Outdoors.
Yeah, we didn't even get down to the whole nature Tic Tacs. We'll get on again.
Nature Tic Tacs, I like it.
Not Tic Tacs. That's underselling it. Just the merging of these worlds of strength and conditioning and the outdoors and the hunting world, and really just the goal is optimal performance and getting the most out of not only your body in the weight room, but like your body like out in this natural state, primal movement, all these things. It's just a cool bleeding together, because I'm a massive fan of nature, like just being out there in general. But now you start moving inside of it, like you start hearing things, you start seeing things, and it's medicine.
Yeah, it's medicine, and you're right. Like, you and I both come from the sporting background, and I mean, without trying to poo-poo it, like both of our sports are just contrived things, right? Like no one really cared. Like, I'm going to give you this weird looking ball, and then you got to go over there. Like, how far? Like, I don't know, like 100 yards. Like, go over there.
Well, I joke that it's like baseball made by some drunks in Cooperstown. Football's made by some drunks in Cleveland. It's just,
And then my thing's like, all right, we're going to take this thing that's kind of a weapon, and we're going to see who can throw it the furthest. And it won't really matter, but we'll make it matter.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's that. But then I like it when it starts getting closer and closer to the organic experience of, like, not to like sell the hunting thing, but like back in the day, if you weren't a good hunter, you didn't eat. Like, it was pretty life or death scenario there. And so, but like you said, like the outdoors are just medicinal. And so then we take Sorin Outdoors is like we take some of these time-tested pieces that we've got from the human performance lifestyle that you and I both dove so deeply down into different phases of our life and still do. And then we go, okay, well, let's put those against maybe a different opponent. And then being the outdoors, and then you realize it's not just an opponent, it's also your resource.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing. And the blending of it being your teammate or your opponent shifts by the second. And that's just a beautiful dance in that.
Yeah, so. Nature's neutral. Like it's not going to favor you one way or the other. Right. It just has consequences. it's a really it's like a authoritarian figure for you. But no, I love the concept of merging the worlds in general, but regressing, because we're like, one of my biggest qualms with life right now is we're so freaking far removed from nature. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our problems, whether that be from light sources, diet, like, so again, the two biggest stressors for humans were environmental stress, which we don't exist anymore because we go from our car to work to our car and back home. Like then food scarcity. Now we have grocery stores and DoorDash. Sure. And that's why fasting's a fad, but fasting's real life in the sense of like a primal human.
Right. And breakfast, break fast.
Yeah. but you're what's a good way to say it? I kind of lost my train of thought, but like there's no more mindlessness to like what you're doing. You're merging the world of the outdoors back to performance, and that's like how to be an optimal human. Right. And so we're trying to solve the same environmental stress problem with the Mind Strong stuff, and then you're breeding the primal side of it.
Yeah, and I'm leaning on you guys to teach me those little things that are gonna squeeze the last bit of performance out in ways that I haven't been successful in different ways, and you're on a similar journey, parallel journey in the same context in many cases, and that's why it's so fun to watch what you're doing and listen to what you're doing and have you involved with different things, because none of us have time to learn all of it.
No, not at all.
But all of us together make a pretty smart person, right? We could start kind of pushing into the tribe, and that's what it's all about. So you could have have your social experiment with your people and lean into their lives while we're all on our little micro adventures. That's what it's all about.
You get the value from everybody. Well, that's a wrap. I appreciate you,
brother.
your time and your wisdom's always.
Man, let's do it again.
Very easy.
And let's have you on Be Legendary.
Done. Yeah. Boom. Thank you. Quick plug, everybody. This episode is brought to you by Max Effort Muscle Supplements. Phenomenal tasting supplements. I take them. I take their amino recovery, their pre-workout, their tri-blend creatine, and their sleep. Been doing phenomenal for me. They are a clean performance brand. They're finishing up their NSF certification as we speak. And then they have all the drip. They have incredible gear. I think they do that better than anybody in the business. And they're supporting the boy. So you can find them at maxeffortmuscle.com or at maxeffortmuscle on social media. Back to the show.